Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Trend Wrap. Host Nicholas Lorimer, joined today by Mr. Michael Morris. Let's get into the news of today, and the first thing we're going to talk about is the survey that's come out from the Brenthurst Foundation, which is looking at the support for various political parties across the country as compared to their previous survey, which was done a couple of months ago. And there's some really fascinating findings from this. So the first one is that the ANC has gone down from the last time this group did a poll. They got 48% for the ANC. That's now down to 41%. The collection of all of the parties that have signed the multi-party charter is up from 34% to 36%. So in other words, there's only 5 points separating the ANC's vote total from the multi-party coalition. This is a pretty good poll for the EFF. I think it's the highest I've seen them in any poll done in the country, up from 11 to 17%. Another very good poll for the IFP, up from 4 to 7%, and I think that's probably closer to what their national final will be. So I put quite a lot of stock in that. And then the other party other parties in the survey, Freedom Front Plus, 1 to 2%. That's very, that could just be statistical noise. And Action SA down from 4 to 3%. It also could just be statistical noise. With the DA sitting on 23%, a little bit down from their previous survey of 24%. So there were also questions asked of the people that they were surveying here. It was a demographically representative survey. They found that 24% of voters said the launch of the multi-party coalition, multi-party charter coalition, made them more likely to vote for an opposition party. I think it was something like 72% of people were keen to see a coalition run the country next year rather than just simply the ANC. 57% of voters cited the ANC government of the last 3 decades as the principal cause of South Africa's problems, which is up from 51% in the last survey done by this group. And I think very damaging for the ANC is that, there was a time when Cyril Ramaphosa was enjoying favorability ratings of 65, 60% across the country. The vast majority of people supported him well. That has turned around. It's down now to about 40%, 42% favorability, with 40% having an unfavorable view. So in other words, he's very close to being more unpopular than he is popular. And I think that's a massive blow for the ANC's electoral prospects. In fact, while he was far ahead of the ANC's popularity in the previous election, it seems, according to this survey, that he's pretty much level pegging now with the ANC's predicted vote share. So, Michael, firstly, what do you make of all this? There's quite a few pieces to pick apart here, but, does this feel like a sort of realistic snapshot of things? What do you think we can draw conclusions we can say?
Yeah, I think some very interesting results here. The one figure that you didn't mention, I don't think, is 80% of people indicating, and this is just to remind viewers, the survey was conducted among registered voters only. So I think that's always a significant kind of limiting factor to the pool that you're actually looking at. That's a very good point. Yes. 80% of respondents indicated they're almost certain to vote in 2024 election. I think that's a very interesting thing. So hopefully, we certainly hope people are beginning to recognize that change is possible, because this does suggest that people are beginning to look at possibilities. It's possible, and it's possible through the ballot box. This is really the key. We've had we have our own Pledge to Vote campaign, which I think is very good and has been gaining some ground, trying to encourage young people, especially, to step up to the plate and actually play a part in shaping the country that they're going to be living in, which is very important. So this is a very significant figure, I think, 80%. And I think the other figure you mentioned, 74% willing to see a sort of coalition of parties governing. That's a pretty high percentage, I would have thought. I don't know what your feeling was about that, Nick.
No, I think that's interesting. And there've been other surveys done which have shown that ANC supporters actually are also very keen on seeing a coalition government. In fact, there seem to be quite a few ANC voters who like the idea of their party going into coalition with someone else. And that's, I'm not sure whether the EFF or DA would be more popular with ANC voters, but I think that does say something about how even ANC voters would like their party
Yeah.
to have a little bit of support in national government and not
Yeah.
be in control of everything.
Exactly. So that's quite an interesting thing to me, quite an interesting reflection of where we are perhaps going as a country. People are beginning to make somewhat more subtle political choices, not simply the sort of diehard, hidebound, we are ANC supporters, we will always vote for the ANC. People are beginning to assess things and make more subtle, more strategic decisions. I almost think, the key moment we have to reach as a country is the moment where whoever the other party is, we just need to choose another party. And even if it's just determined, even if it's a disaster, just do it once. And I think from that moment on, we get the sense that we can actually do it. We just bring in a party we think is going to make a success. If they fail, we turf them out and choose somebody else. It seems to be quite a sort of critical moment, a sort of watershed. I can't think of the fulcrum, or I can't think of the metaphor, but a point to be the little bump that we've got to get over, and just to prove to ourselves in a way that we can do it and that it's worth doing, and that we can try different policies and take the risk of putting our trust in different kinds of promises, given that the ones we've had now for 30 years have been bombing out so badly.
Yes.
So
when you look at other countries with a similar electoral system to South Africa, where you have this proportional list of electing people to parliament, you find that those parliaments tend to be extremely divided, with the biggest party getting maybe 30-something% of the vote. And it really does begin to look like South Africa is actually kind of starting to head in that direction. And I think it is legitimate to wonder whether we have seen 2019 was the last election where any political party will get more than 50% of the vote in a South African election, which is going to be quite a watershed for how our politics works.
Sure, exactly.
Okay.
And of course, we were talking earlier, and you mentioned the EFF showing in this result up from, I think it was 11 to 17, which
yes, very good poll for them.
Very good poll for us. Both of us feel maybe a little doubtful about whether they're that popular, but maybe the ground is certainly fertile for them to till, and they're very good at exploiting the sentiment out there. But I suppose, I'd be interested to know your thoughts about the prospects of the ANC turning to the EFF under these circumstances. The DA 23, 30, MPC coalition parties 36 and ANC at 41. They're looking a bit dodgy. Do you think they'd happily turn to the EFF? I know you've had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so happily, I don't think it's the right thing to describe it. I think the ANC may well turn to the EFF. There's a very strong ideological sort of shared worldview. They obviously have a lot of shared history, as the EFF is in many ways just the ANC Youth League that's sort of gone rogue. Yet the problem is they both kind of, I think, compete in many ways for the same sort of patch. They both are sort of heavily infused with kind of patronage networks that compete for resources. They both have, the same kind of voters that they'll be fighting over for the most part. And I get the sense that the ANC also knows that the EFF's, goal is to ultimately crush the ANC and replace it as the sort of voice of Black nationalism and African liberation and all that stuff. And it's not a very comfortable, it's a little bit like sort of sitting down to dinner with someone who plans to kill you. It's going to be a difficult alliance to hold together. But the ANC may not have another choice. I think that any of the political parties in the MPC, the multi-party charter that get together with the ANC, will probably be signing their own political death warrant. And so the ANC may well kind of be forced to run the government with this shaky alliance with the EFF. And who knows? I think that will be very unpredictable for our politics, because it'll be very difficult to work out exactly how that alliance would work, if it would work at all. Maybe we're going to see some kind of minority government with the ANC, gets their presidential candidate elected, but that's about as far as their governance goes. And the rest of the time is just fighting in parliament. So we sit on the precipice of interesting times. Anyway,
very, very interesting times.
Still a whole election cycle to go through, and which certainly those numbers will shift. So even if this poll is 100% accurate now, it doesn't represent the final result of what the election will be. we've got all sorts of things to look forward to in the election. The ANC and EFF will have big rallies at some point. There'll be some drama on the campaign trail, and inevitably, someone at some point will accuse the DA of some sort of racist activity, which will bring all sorts of headlines. So we'll have to see what happens and how things shift. But right now, I think it's very interesting, and I wonder, if the ANC is going to be able to pull off the kind of election campaign that will rescue it from this position and bring it back to 50%. And so far, I'm doubtful. Anyway, so we're only going to do that topic, I think, today. And I hope that you found this interesting. I certainly did. And for today, that's a wrap.